Okay, let's hit on the board's role. This is really a sea change. I've been doing this work since about 99, 2000, so it's been a long time, and I have been preaching to boards for years and years that they need to pay attention to cybersecurity, and it absolutely fell on deaf ears. They paid lip service, but it's only since about 2013 that they really sat up and took notice. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons for that is that senior executives have been ousted and boards have been threatened with ouster. So they are personally feeling the pain of cyber attacks. Target was really a wake-up call. The SEC came out with a statement, one of the commissioners came out with a statement that said that boards that ignore cybersecurity do so at their own peril. Well, that really got people's attention. And so now cybersecurity, fast forward to 2020, and even a couple of years prior, boards really do pay attention to this issue. And we find, for example, that boards will now get reports quarterly on cybersecurity issues, and that is a real sea change from a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, we don't get very much direction on cybersecurity governance from case law, but we'll talk, the next slide will address what case law there is on this issue, so it might be interesting to take this back and think about these issues with your boards. Typically, cybersecurity oversight is taken by the audit committee. Some companies have technology committees, so it doesn't really matter what committee it is. What does matter is that that committee embed their charge into something like a charter or governance document so that it is formalized that they have responsibility for cybersecurity issues. So case law does suggest a few items for us, and so these are reasonably vague, but we can make them more specific. You all know how to do that. You need to educate your board on the current threat environment for your company and tell your board where your crown jewels are and how to protect those crown jewels. The board should generally be overseeing your governance structure for information security to be able to provide appropriate oversight. They can't provide that oversight if they don't know what your governance structure is. And they should be told about major budgeting and major information security initiatives. Of course, it's also helpful for boards to get benchmarking reports on peer companies, so that's a useful dashboard for them to see. And often boards will bring in external experts to present to them about cybersecurity risks, the threat landscape, the legal landscape, and that's also something that case law tells us is useful. And in addition to that, you're going to want to tell them what outside experts you will use in the event of a major cyber attack, so that you have all of those folks lined up in advance to bring in if you need them on a dime. And finally, as I mentioned, it's very important to make sure that the board's duties are appropriately documented, whether it's in a charter or in meeting minutes or in policies and procedures. Just very quickly, taking you through an attack timeline. In all the breaches that we do, all the cyber events, it's always the same. We identify the event, we mobilize the incident response team, we stabilize systems if there is, for example, a live intruder in the system. We investigate, typically using a third-party forensic investigator. We conduct the legal analysis. Do we have an SEC reporting obligation? Do we have reporting obligations to third parties like business partners, service providers? What kind of data has been compromised? What systems are compromised? Can we continue with operations? Do we need to shut something down? All of that needs to be analyzed. and often we'll bring in law enforcement. I am very bullish on bringing in law enforcement. I think they've been very helpful in recent years in giving us, for example, indicators of compromise that we can look for in our systems when we've sort of identified a threat actor, but we're not really sure. They can really be very helpful. And then we go out and we notify whoever we need to notify. That might be the SEC, that might be business partners, that might be affected individuals. And then you can bet that in a very big breach, a compromise of some sort, there will be regulatory response. The regulators will come back to us, we'll ask questions. That's a little dance that we go through for 6 months or a year. And then if other people's data or systems are impacted by your event, you can bet that there are going to be lawsuits that follow. In Yahoo, there were 40-some class action lawsuits that needed to be consolidated and managed. And then we always do a post-mortem at the end of the day. Very important to do a post-mortem. So, quick wrap up, there are ramifications to cybersecurity events. There is turnover at the board level, at the C-suite level. There's a lot of litigation to follow, and regulators get into the act, as does Congress. There have been many now hearings in Congress about these issues, and they're really quite devastating for companies, and companies take a huge reputational hit, not just from the event, but then having to relive it in front of Congress. The financial loss could be very significant. As I mentioned, we've seen ransomware as high as 25 million. Typically, it's in the 1 million to 2 million range, or 5 to 6 million, but it could go much, much higher. And then investigation and remediation costs could be very significant as well. So I will leave it at that, other than to say this is a very pernicious environment, so be careful out there. Thank you.